Our next presentation is a paper presentation. The title is No Questions Asked, Effect of Transparency on Stablecoin Liquidity During the Collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. So about, the collapse of an existing, so supposedly very robust financial bank within a supposedly very robust financial system. Our speaker is Walter Hernandez, which is a PhD student at UCL. He's actually a member of our team as well at the UK CBT, so we are honored to have him as a speaker. And the discussant for the paper will be Marco Alberto Iavarone from the Department of Physics at the University of Bari. Walter, the floor is yours. Round of applause for Walter, please.
Thank you, Francesco. So the purpose of this paper is in the previous discussion, in the previous panel discussion, we saw that some of the topics that were raised is that how information sensitivity and management of liquidity, etc., can affect stablecoins. In this paper, we take an apply type of research. So we looked exactly when Silicon Valley Bank fell, 2023, in March of last year, along with other banks that fell at the time. One of them was Silvergate Bank, and another one was First Citizen Bank. These three banks, USDC, in this case, Circle, has some cash reserves held at these banks. And what we want to see in this paper is how the news surrounding this event and how the liquidity or reserves management of them affected from a decentralized finance type of perspective. There's already plenty of research that has been done looking exactly at the bank reactions. So as a refresher from the previous panel, and if it's needed, so this is how a stablecoin issuance work. So you will have your normal user of stablecoin who provides some fiat to the issuer, and then the issuer gives back to them a stablecoin. And that stablecoin is backed by some cash reserves that you as an issuer, you use in order that you can provide liquidity in the redeem for fiat in the time that is required by the user. And of course, you can have other financial instruments from where you can generate some type of revenue, which most of the case would be something that is low risk, like US Treasury bills, and you can earn, I think now it's like 4%, 5%, and then that's how issuers of stablecoin generate their money. If we look, for example, as an asset, you would see, for example, the market cap of a Bitcoin. If you relate the amount of stablecoin market cap, it represents 13.5% of Bitcoin. But when you look at, for example, at Ethereum, it's 56%. But still, it's not at the level of some money market fund. Money market fund is this, when in terms of a stablecoin relating it to asset under management and money market fund, is still under 2.7%. So yes, in a way you can say it's still in a young stage. For this paper, we focus only on USDT and USDC because I think both of them represent like 90% of the market for stablecoins. Of course, you might have other stablecoins that you might prefer to use, for example, DAI, because it's purely has the reserves on chain, other type of stablecoins that you might have a specific use case. But for this study, we focus on the main ones and the main two dominants in the market. If you are a physics-oriented person, which in the next paper that we're going to see from Marco Alberto Iavarone, you will see an interesting application of physics when analyzing from a finance perspective and also to Bitcoin. But to give you, at least in the perspective of this research, if you take metastability from physics, the concept, the idea that if you try to get some momentum, depending on the force that you apply, you will get it will roll down in this case. So you have this barrier of trust. In this case, it's represented by how much you trust the stablecoin that you're using. What that trust is, that's represented by the information that you have available when using that stablecoin. And this is specifically from the perspective of the issuer of the stablecoin, how much you trust it. And that barrier, how much it is or not, we would see how that looked like from the perspective of Silicon Valley Bank event. Right, to recapitulate, the timeline of the events that surround this, the Silicon Valley Bank and how it affected Circle's USDC. We can go all the way back to March 2022, when the Federal Reserve Market Committee started increasing the interest rate because of all the inflation-related issues, post-COVID, etc. And then how that started a year later affecting Silvergate Capital Bank, where they announced a liquidation, and then you have 1 day afterwards Silicon Valley Bank announcing some of the stock failing. Some of the stock falling more than 60%. And then we have this tweet from Circle where they're revealing exactly the amount of cash reserves that they had stock in Silicon Valley Bank. Apart from Silicon Valley Bank, there were Silvergate and First Citizen Bank where Circle also had some money. Now, the reactions of the market during this time, we see USDC depeg for 24 hours. You can see this massive drop here in the depeg, and this was given the information about the time, and then how quickly it recovered. Now, we want to know and we want to understand, given the information, so we take some theory from the market fishing hypothesis. So if you know Eugene Fama, and also for information asymmetries, etc., and we're trying to apply how this looks like in this context. Taking all this information and looking at decentralized finance, given that one of the main use cases, at least as of now, for stablecoins is for using in decentralized exchanges, for swapping different type of tokens, we can see how the total value locked reacted to all these different types of events. So you can see there were some drops before Circle revealed information about how they were affected by Silicon Valley Bank. Okay. So the question that we try to answer, giving you all this background given to you of these events, is how was the liquidity in the decentralized exchanges reflecting these events around Silicon Valley Bank collapse? And as well, in terms of transparency, how that affected differently USDC and USDT. Now, we define here transparency as the frequency of reporting and also as how detailed is that reporting. We say frequency reporting because when you look at USDC, they report every month. USDT is every 6 months. And also you have for Tether that they do not report you where they have their cash reserves, versus Circle USDC that you know exactly in which banks was some of that money. And of course, as well, we want to understand the market dynamics and the consumption of this liquidity. We based, or the theoretical model in which we based our analysis, this is from Ben Holstrom, he's laureate in economics. The main idea is you have two types of instruments, debt instruments, and you have equity instruments. The difference between a debt instrument and in this case, an equity instrument is how they react to information, how sensitive they are to information. We heard in the previous panel how this was emphasized. And from a theoretical model standpoint, we can see that in the case of debt, you only care about the information available for your debt at the point of redemption. So it would be at this point. While before that, you would not care too much. You are information insensitive in terms of the collateral backing your debt. How we can see this play. So if you look at the European Union, Mario Draghi, this is in 2012, when there was some issues with the euro, he made this quite famous speech where he's emphasizing that the European Central Bank was ready to do whatever it takes to keep the euro stable. And he's sending a strong message to the market, said, don't try. We will do as much as we need to keep our token, or euro stable. Right, looking at for example, this is some of the reports. You can see in the case of Tether, when you look at the breakdown of the reserves, you will see that some of them are in Bitcoins, precious metals, and 84% majority are in cash and cash equivalent. This will be treasury bills, so you can quickly redeem and get liquidity. Now, you might question here, and we heard that in the previous panel, so questioning about using precious metals or Bitcoins in favor or against, given the volatility that both can have. But at least for a study, what we care is that when you look at this report and you start looking at the small prints in the report, you start seeing things like this, where they emphasize to you that this report is not representing of a financial statement of the state of USDC. And then when you compound into this, that this report is every 6 months, you don't have enough time to react to the market. Then, this is a quote from one of my colleagues, Juan Ibanez. You can see this reaction particularly for why Tether is reacting the way it's reacting to MiCA regulation. Why? Because that means they will have to reduce some of the freedom that they have to manage the reserves. Now, looking at Circle, Circle has less type of instruments being used for to back up the value of USDC. Most of them are pretty much cash, treasury bills, or at least that's how it was when we look at the reports of March of last year. And then we can see this. I don't know if you can see it properly from your distance, but this is very important because it tells you that this is a SEC regulated type of entity as a money market fund. You know how money market funds, you know how that's well regulated. And it tells you as well the cash, where the cash is being held specifically, which banks. So, and I forgot to mention as well, and let's consider that these reports are released every month versus the other one is only 6 months. And if you are a trader, you can react quickly because you know more, you have more information. Looking at DAI, this is just to give you another example. DAI is everything is on chain, so you can go and look at the collaterals backing up the value. And you can see it's over collateralized in general. Right. So for our study, the main interest is to look at liquidity in the centralized exchanges. To give you as a reference, what we mean by this is if you look at the limited order book, let's say Binance order book, where you have a buy and sell orders. Here you will have a market maker trying to provide liquidity depending on the ask and the spreads. And taking this into the centralized exchanges, specifically Uniswap, because Uniswap has the 60% of the market, so that's our focus. When you provide liquidity, you decide the price range where you're going to provide your liquidity. So you have an effect that the majority of people concentrate the liquidity where the current price is. So we take Uniswap, and what we do is doing some quick math calculations, which I'm not showing here. We can take that idea of the automated market maker of concentrated liquidity and reformulate it as a limited order book, where the two assets, in this case ETC and USDC, will either represent your sell or buy orders. And that allows us to do an event study analysis where we have a control group and a treatment group. Our control group are some of the top liquidity pools available, and we do a differences in different type of regression. So if you have done some econometrics or finance, that's used to analyze how statistically significant are the events. So the two events that we try to analyze is Circle providing more information, because in the reports available for Circle, we only know that they have a total of 40 million, if I remember the number exactly, in a number of banks, but we don't know exactly how much money were in those banks. And then we have the second event, where is a regulatory intervention. Because the money being held at Silicon Valley Bank, it did not have any insurance for it. And I'm just giving you, we're not going to go into details these formulas, but just to give you a general idea. So this is a formula used for liquidity analysis, limited order books. So we do some updates, some changes, and we apply the formula for, in this case, for the automated market maker Uniswap. And the Gini coefficient, which is just to measure how much, given that we have a lot of liquidity information, how concentrated is the liquidity among the liquidity providers. Right, so the first finding is that you can see these reactions. So USDT is the orange and USDC is the blue line. Before the events, so you have this big spike here, which is telling you the cost of consuming the liquidity available, how much interest was by traders to consume this amount of liquidity, so and how much they were willing to pay a premium to consume the liquidity during the event. So it's a classic flight to safety behavior that you find in traditional finance, where you move from a perceived highly risky asset and you move to another one for which you believe is a more safe asset. And then afterwards you see that everything comes down. And where that comes down is specifically related to the two events that we have interest for this. So the first event, when Circle disclosure how much money they had in held in Silicon Valley Bank, that had a calming effect in traders because they knew exactly that represented only 80% of their cash reserves. Well, before they didn't know exactly how much it was. So, and then we have the second event when we have the regulatory intervention where that completely equalized the difference between USDC and USDT. We have seen this in the past. For example, if you have read all of Bernanke's research, most of the research from the 1920s financial deep recession, he showed the importance of regulatory intervention, timely regulatory intervention, to avoid these issues. And as well, given that we have all this information about liquidity being provided, this might not be surprising for some of you, but the majority of liquidity is concentrated among a few liquidity providers. And another finding is that the higher fee pools that have the majority of retail liquidity providers. And while the pools that provide the less fees, that had big liquidity providers, you can speculate they could be institutional providers, but we don't know exactly the identity who they are. And then you can see also some liquidity shifts. So when we look at the top 5 liquidity providers between the pools, you have examples such as this one, the orange one, how it's moving their liquidity from that pool that has DAI. DAI was affected indirectly because they were holding USDC as part of the reserves, and then how they become a top liquidity provider in another one of their pools. And so from these findings, so the main conclusions and implication is that when you have a high detail and high frequency reporting, the market can react quickly to these events. But when, at least in the case of Tether, that has less frequent and more opaque type of reporting, it provides a temporary buffer for market reactions because you don't know that much what is going on behind the scenes for this type of a stablecoin. And that also raises all the questions about how to handle stablecoins that have no safety net. In the case of the cash reserves being held at Silicon Valley Bank, there was no insurance or lender of last resort. So that's why we see the reaction when the FDC, the Department of Treasury, and the Fed, they intervene and say, we're going to make everyone whole. You see that how the market reacted positively. And as well, this another question that this raises is to reevaluate the disclosure practices for stablecoins that have no safety net. That will be my presentation. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Here I have some observation. I have the pleasure to read their paper, very interesting. And I have some observation and a few questions. So let me start summarizing what that they found. Let's start from the goal. So what that they try to do is try to understand the relationship between traditional finance and decentralized finance, with a particular focusing on measuring the effects of traditional finance crisis on DeFi. Well, what's the strategy? The strategy has been that of comparing the reactions of two similar stable coins, USDC, USDT, whose different relies in having a different levels of transparency. Now, from a systemic point of view, we can see two different systems. Traditional finance containing assets like stocks, options, metals, and fiat that are the main object of this discussion, and decentralized finance having digital assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on, and stablecoins, which represent the main topic. So, the authors analyze the impact of what is called information asymmetry on liquidity provisioning in DeFi, and the effect of information asymmetry is already known in traditional finance, but is something new, something to be still investigated, and they did, and it's been great for this reason, in decentralized finance, focusing on the two stable coins with different level of transparency. So, another point that is very interesting is that what they observe is the behavior of investor behavior to lean towards flight to safety. Flight to safety means selling what is perceived as a high-risk investment, seeking for safer alternatives. And at the same time, uncertainty result from the lack of transparency is amazing that has a positive effect on that. Now, I have a paper that I published with my colleague 4 years ago that tried to explain this effect from a theoretical point of view using evolutionary game theory. So that was so interesting to read yours, because we analyzed dilemma games, like for instance the prisoner dilemma, where there are cooperators and defectors, and it is possible actually to map our game with what they have been investigating in their work. For instance, cooperators are those that act with a high level of transparency, while defectors are those acting with low or no level of transparency at all. So we have an agent population that we run in Monte Carlo simulation in order to see the final behavior of the population is cooperation or defection depending on the condition, and in particular depending on the so-called payoff matrix that we can use as a reference in order to add some uncertainty, that is the same uncertainty that they have been measuring in the real world. Well, in this plot, representing one of our results, we have the following scenario. On the left-hand side, we have a level of cooperation that is due to the fact that being a cooperator, being full transparent, is something beneficial, like what we observe for most of the digital assets in these cases. However, these lines represent the trend of the density of cooperators increasing the temptation, that is increasing the temptation to become a defector. Now, if we affect the payoff matrix with some disturb in order to introduce some noise, as the one they have in their work, what we observe is that the amount of cooperators decreases. This means that in some sense, uncertainty support a little bit more the emergence of defection, even if cooperation is something very, very good. So it's very interesting because from our point of view, running an agent-based model only from a theoretical point of view, we weren't able at the end to find a real-world application that in this case is what you have been measuring with cryptocurrencies. So amazing. Now, I have a question, like for instance, have you been measuring similar effect considering other digital assets like, for instance, Bitcoin? Because I had a quick look and I didn't find anything, but maybe there can be some delayed effect, so maybe it could be of interest as additional work to do that. Then what we observed was that it seems, just looking at the trend of the TVL of the USDT, it seems that it's possible to exploit the crisis that USDC has been undergoing during the crisis of the Silicon Valley Bank. And so the question is this positive trend going to find an end or keep going over time? So finally, to avoid running out of time and summarizing, the results of this investigation suggest actually that there is a deep relationship between TradFi and DeFi, so it's very cool. And while typically transparency is beneficial because, for instance, can lead to a success in the initial coin offering, for the stable coin represent a contradiction, as I found in your paper. As a possible future direction, I'm asking if, what do you think? Maybe using on-chain data from the blockchain, can we find something more with relation to what you observed, as well as can you extend to other cryptos or using other tools like network analysis and so on? And finally, let me ask you this. Do you think it is possible to study the inverse reaction, that is having some crisis on the DeFi and if this crisis can affect somehow traditional finance, some of asset and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Sorry, Marco Alberto. I'm very glad that you like it and that you can find some actual application of your theoretical work. I would say looking how DeFi will affect traditional finance, that's a question that I think also regulators are making themselves, because at least so far, if you see the reaction to current cryptocurrencies, they have been trying to keep a bit isolated from the current market. But now, given the issuance of ETFs, probably down the road, that's a question that we might get an answer, hopefully not so soon, because that would mean we need some type of black swan event in order that we can answer if Bitcoin how it's affecting the current market. But as of now, I wouldn't be able to say how we can go about it to respond, because at least the linkage from traditional finance to DeFi is clear through stablecoins, but the other way around is still, I think, a work on development, given all the different type of financial products being issued. Probably with real-world asset tokenization, when it takes further down the line, probably we might or might not see some effect. But that would be an interesting question to try to answer. Hopefully, I hope personally not soon, because that means something bad has to happen in the financial markets. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.